Chapter 44:29 One sword to banish the mortal world. The void was deathly silent. Only the strong wind continued to reverberate. The spectators who had already retreated far away looked at this scene in a daze and felt chills all over their bodies. Great Sun Prince was dead. The King of Day was dead. Even Supreme Jade Cauldron, who was a half-step unrivaled supreme and had an all-powerful cultivation base in the universe, had been killed by Jian Wushuang. No words could describe the shock in their hearts. Originally, it was already shocking enough that Jian Wushuang had killed a supreme when he was an ultimate ruler. Now, Jian Wushuang, who was a beginner supreme, had killed a half-step unparalleled supreme. This was too shocking. Such a thing had never happened in the universe. Whether it was the number one genius from 100,000 chaos cycles ago, the East Boundary, or the ninth Kalpa King, who had been regarded as a monstrous genius, none of them could compare to the current Jian Wushuang. Jade, it seems like the universe is really going to change. An elementary level supreme killed a half-step unrivaled supreme. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. Number one heaven's favorite of all time. From now on, the entire universe will remember one name, Jian Wushuang. Legendary. Jian Wushuang is a legend. From today on, there will be one more person at the peak of the universe, and that is Jian Wushuang. If the invincible ruler doesn't show up, I'm afraid Jian Wushuang will be able to sweep across the universe. Countless people spoke. At that moment, they looked at Jian Wushuang in black with deep adoration and fanaticism in their eyes. There were even female cultivators who were dazzled and seeing stars. If it were not for the rumors in the universe that Jian Wushuang had already married, they would have rushed forward on the spot and become his wife and concubine. No one present was an idiot. Jian Wushuang was powerful and had amazing talent. No one dared to say how amazing Jian Wushuang's future achievements would be, if not for the fact that Jian Wushuang's enemies, such as the Dragon Clan and Cosmos Temple, many people in the universe would have wanted to get close to Jian Wushuang and form a good relationship. But now, after Jian Wushuang had killed the half-unrivaled Supreme Jade Cauldron, these people suddenly became bold and fearless. Jian Wushuang has only cultivated for 700,000 years, but he already has the strength to kill a half-step unparalleled supreme. If Jian Wushuang is allowed to cultivate for another 700,000 years, the Dragon Clan may not be his match. The dragon race has lived in peace for too long, and they've been arrogant for too long. It's time for someone to teach them that they are no longer universe masters. The Dragon Clan sounds powerful, but it's just that. A few second-generation dragon clans who have been struggling to survive can only rely on sleeping to keep their lives. The remaining third-generation dragon clans may be powerful, but when Jian Wushuang grows up completely, he might have a chance to overthrow them. I'm certain that this universe will belong to Jian Wushuang after 10,000 chaos cycles. Countless people's eyes were burning as they spoke with determination. Then, they looked at each other and walked toward Jian Wushuang, intending to form a good relationship with him. Among them, there was a concierge who came to the ancestor worshipping ceremony. He ran quickly as he was afraid that Jian Wushuang would vent his anger on them. He quickly tried to explain. Supreme Peerless, I'm Supreme Golden Saber of the Limitless Divine Sect. I've come to greet you, Supreme Wushuang. I'm the Island Master of 5 Turtle Island. I'm here to apologize to you. My participation in the Great Sun God's ancestral worship ceremony is because my ancestor is an old friend of his. All of a sudden, all kinds of fawning voices were heard. These people were all experts above middle supreme master level. However, they were all flattering Jian Wushuang and dared not show any disrespect. If this scene fell into the eyes of an uninformed person, it would definitely make one's eyes pop out. Jian Wushuang's expression was calm. These people were just grass on the wall that swayed with the wind. Fortunately, he had won today. If he had lost, these people would definitely have spat at him in disdain after he was killed by Supreme Jade Cauldron and the others. Jian Wushuang didn't pay much attention to them. He extended his right hand and the interspatial rings of Emperor God of the Great Sun and Supreme Jade Cauldron flew toward him. After grabbing the interspatial ring, Jian Wushuang used his divine power to scan the inside of the ring and he could not help but be moved. The wealth in their interspatial rings was simply terrifying. Even before the supreme lightning tribulation had begun and he had many supreme treasures to self-destruct, he was far inferior to these two. These two people must have stolen many opportunities from others because of their powerful cultivation. Jian Wushuang snorted and shook his head. He put away the two interspatial rings and turned to the great sun divine kingdom. Whoosh! Jian Wushuang turned into a sword light and crossed the sky like a shooting star. He then fell into the Great Sun Divine Kingdom. Within Great Sun Divine Kingdom, many people who had not rushed out of the starry sky to watch, as well as the royal descendants who had stayed behind to guard the Great Sun Divine Kingdom, were discussing. They looked relaxed and even had the time to drink tea. It seemed like they were not worried that the King of Day and the others would lose. Queen, His Majesty the Celestial Emperor and the others haven't returned after such a long time. Could something have happened to them? A guard from the Great Sun Divine Kingdom said with worry in his eyes. The queen was a beautiful woman. She put down her teacup and said casually, Jian Wushuang is only a beginner supreme. How can he be your majesty's opponent? Moreover, with the help of Supreme Jade Cauldron, Jian Wushuang will be executed no matter how powerful he is. The guard couldn't help but hesitate for a moment before saying, Queen, for safety's sake, I think we should go and take a look. Hearing this, Great Sun Queen frowned and was about to reprimand him. At this moment, accompanied by a loud rumble, a deep voice exploded like thunder and rolled down. The King of Day is dead. The other members of the Great Sun royal family are also guilty. Although they are not dead, their cultivation should be cut off as a warning to the others. Whoosh! Jian Wushuang's figure condensed in the void. In an instant, countless descendants of the Great Sun Heavenly King's royal family were scared out of their wits. They couldn't believe it. The King of Day's face turned pale instantly. How is this possible? How could His Majesty be defeated? Jian Wushuang's expression was cold and his black hair was flying in the air. He stood proudly in the void. He looked down at Great Sun Divine Kingdom, shook his head, and slashed down with his sword. This sword will strip you of your cultivation. Boom! In an instant, the sword did not seem to cause any damage. It did not even move a blade of grass. Instead, it directly cut into everyone who had the bloodline of the King of Day. This sword move was a variant of the Eternal Night Sword move. It had the power to strip everything. It was a small superpower that Jian Wushuang had derived after he had comprehended the sword essence of Taro Supreme. My cultivation. What's going on? Why is my cultivation level declining? Don't. In an instant, the King of Day Imperial Palace was filled with screams. Countless people could feel their cultivation levels rapidly declining, and their faces were filled with extreme shock. The people who had come with Jian Wushuang noticed this scene and shivered all over. One sword to cut off his cultivation. What kind of supernatural method was this? One must know that there were nearly 10,000 people in the Great Sun royal family. Jian Wushuang looked at them indifferently and slashed out 4 sword lights again. The 4 sword radiances shot up into the sky and then hid in the void. From today on, for the next 90 million years, no one from the King of Day royal family is allowed to step out of the King of Day Palace. The King of Day Imperial Palace has been sealed for tens of millions of years. Buzz! The 4 sword radiances hidden in the void turned their tips and would kill anyone who dared to step out of the Great Sun Imperial Palace. In an instant, countless Great Sun royal family members' faces turned ashen. Jian Wushuang did not say anything more. He took a step forward and turned into a ray of light. Chapter 4430. Inside the universe starry sky. Wu Zhenshou piloted the spacecraft and kept moving forward. He sat cross-legged in the space capsule, frosty between his eyebrows. Extreme. This person is definitely one of Jian Wushuang's most wanted to kill. If you say that the Lord of the Blood Temple, the Emperor of the Sun, the Emperor of the Red Sun, and others are only accomplices, then the Supreme Master of Bingyu is the culprit. White Tiger Supreme is forced to explode by being forced by Bingyu Supreme. The feud between him and Bingyu Supreme is not shared. I don't know how many times Bingyu Supreme led his team to hang him, such as the one in the wild wilderness. If it wasn't for the white-haired ancestors, I'm afraid it would be dead at that time. There is an earlier Shinkong ancient road, and the prisoner dragon is the Bingyu Supreme sent to kill his sword Wushuang. If this is not the case, his sword Wushuang will not gradually face the dragon. Of course, sword Wushuang has no regrets and no fear, but his heart hates Bingyu for his supremacy. Waiting to kill me in Taishu Temple? Wu Jianshou sneered. This word was issued by Bingyu Supreme to the entire universe. He also heard the words similar to the war books. This made him kill Bingyu Supreme, and suddenly took him to another level. Even to this day, this Bingyu will never die. Very good, my sword is unparalleled to see, how do you cut me? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes and flashed a sigh of coldness. I was inside the temple of the virtual god. Shu Bingyu sat on the throne with a sneer on the corner of his mouth and rubbed a blue magic sword blade in his hand. This sword, the name of God. At that time in the wild wilderness of the universe, he strangled Jian Wushuang, but was killed halfway by the patriarch's ancestors to save them. His saber, the ice sword with the same name as him, was even inched by the patriarch's ancestors. Swallow. And this sword named, he later spent a large price to buy from an invincible supreme, in terms of power is not inferior to the original ice dagger, or even stronger. Sword is unparalleled, take you and sacrifice this sword. Bing Extreme turned over with his right hand, pointed his sword at the void outside the temple, capturing the hunting chill. Don't wait for this seat to break through the invincible supreme, otherwise any life shrine, any hegemonic ancestor, you must die for this seat. He chuckled in his heart, and was equally worried about the overlord ancestor who destroyed his magic sword and blasted him with a punch. Come here. After a short while, he put away the Excalibur and called out, Da. Suddenly, a disciple of the Taishu Temple stepped in and congratulated. I ask you, where is Sword Warrior now, what's abnormal? The disciple was lying on the ground and heard the words and said, told the Lord Emperor, Jian Wushuang is rushing to Taishu Temple quickly, and there is nothing unusual. Ah, that's good. Bing nodded supremely and sneered softly, swords warriors, so eager to find dead people, this seat is the first time in the universe to see. Wu Jianshou drove the cosmic boat, and approached the temple of Taishu continuously. Along the way, he didn't have any intention of covering his breath, so everywhere he went, there was a burst of exclaim. You see, this and this breath is sword unparalleled. The goal of Jian Wushuang, it really is the temple of two virtual. Well, Bingyu Supreme is not a bad stubble, this battle looks good. Jiang Wushuang is strong, but Bingyu Supreme is also a hard bone. The half-step invincible Supreme who died in the hand of Bingyang Supreme is more. It is really hard to say if Jian Wushuang can take down this hard bone. Jian Wushuang's own creation. If Jian Wushuang can kill, pay attention to killing the Ice Cricket Supreme, then Jian Wushuang can almost be determined, now he is the first person below the Supreme Master. Walk around, this battle is nothing short of ancient and ancient. It is rare and must not be miss. Hurry to Taishu Temple. It's lively this time. I heard that all the major forces have all sent people to watch the war. Once Jian Wushuang really wins, they will hold Jian Wushuang as the new king. Countless people's eyes are eager and open to discuss. Afterwards, they all drove Shiguang and swept away towards the Taishu Temple. Among them, there are representatives sent by the major forces, who have brought the Shuangguang mirror, intending to record all the details of this battle. Even the three masters and apprentices who were saved by Jian Wushuang in the Terra ruins today came to cheer for Jian Wushuang from the extremely distant wilderness. There are also Emperor Jinwu, the leader of Shaking Mountain, the Lord of Stardust, etc., one after another who has no origin with swords. This battle is highly anticipated. After 3 months, Jian Wushuang arrived at the star field where the Taishu Temple was located. The puppet star field is already full of countless people watching from all directions, and the flag is rolling like waves. Wu Jianshou stopped the spacecraft and stepped out of the cabin. There was a loud noise in my ears, and many familiar faces. Master Bloodsword, come on! How Emperor dominated his face excitedly, shouting from a distance. Bloodsword, you will win. The water which dominated the three, and his face turned red, crowded at the outermost part of the crowd, and waved the flag to cheer. Sword does not abandon your lord, Be careful. Stardust, who was already alone, dominated, and clenched his fists. Wu Jiansu looked for a moment, glanced over the familiar faces, and then smiled. Rest assured. Wu Jianwushuang nodded toward them, then turned to look at the central position of Taishu Starfield, the suspended Taishu Temple, taking a deep breath. This sucking, like a whale sucking water, all the powerful wind energy around you into your mouth. Next moment. He opened his mouth to make a sound, as if the sound of a thunder blasted, rolled down, shocked for 9 days and 10 places. Bingao, haven't you come to death yet? Boom. As soon as this remark came down, the miles of the sky were shaken by the earthquake, like a tsunami. Swords matchless, you it today. Immediately, a cold voice came out of the center of the Taishu Temple, and the rolling sound of the sword warriors was completely defeated. A white streamer burst out and landed 10 feet in front of Jian Wushuang. The streamer shattered, revealing the supreme figure of the moraine. Sword unparalleled, only one of you and me today can walk out of this star field alive. Bing stood with supreme negative hands and frowned. Just what I want. The sword flickered in the eyes of Wu Jian, holding the Taro Excalibur in his right hand, and pulled it out of the scabbard an inch. A magnificent sword pressure came to the audience instantly. Come on. Xu Bingji snorted extremely coldly, turned his right hand over, his body was scarlet, and the evil spirit reached the extreme sword, condensed in his hands. There is no nonsense in between. The two powerful auras, as if forming a substance, continue to squeeze in the void collision, setting off a horrible void storm. When everyone watched the battle, their eyes were stunned. They know. This battle of ancient times is about to begin. Chapter 4431 Committing Suicide at the Same Time. Just as Jian Wushuang was steering Universe Boat toward the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom, many gazes within the universe were also focused on the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom. Through the previous 2 crusades, they finally understood that Jian Wushuang's targets grew from weak to strong. For example, the Blood Skyhall Master, who had died first, was the weakest of the 6 forces that had killed Jian Wushuang. He had the weakest foundation and was only a top supreme. As for the remaining 5 forces, apart from the King of Day, who had already died, the weakest of them had already reached the half-step unparalleled supreme level. The Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom is finished. Countless people shook their heads. Within the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom. Father, what should we do now? Your Majesty, say something. The Imperial Palace was in chaos. Countless commanders and ministers of the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom, including Scarlet Sun Demon Master's descendants, looked at Scarlet Sun Demon Master on the throne in despair. The news that Jian Wushuang had killed the Emperor God of Sun and Supreme Jade Cauldron was like a bolt of lightning that struck everyone in the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom. Even the Supreme King of the Great Sun and Supreme Jade Cauldron had died. What could the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom do to resist? At that moment, endless regret welled up in the hearts of countless people in the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom. Why? Why did he have to provoke Jian Wushuang? All right, stop quarreling. Scarlet Sun Demon Master's face was square, and his entire person was filled with a sense of authority. He slammed the armrest of his throne and glanced coldly at the people in the hall who were trembling like quails because of Jian Wushuang's name. He snorted and said, "Back then, when I was going to flatten the Divine Life Palace and kill Jian Wushuang, you were the ones who made the most noise. You wanted to get a share of the loot after I flattened the Divine Life Palace. Now, Jian Wushuang is powerful. He hasn't even arrived yet, but you're all so scared that you're all in danger. It's really embarrassing." As soon as he finished speaking, the originally chaotic hall immediately returned to silence. Everyone present lowered their heads, not King of Day to look at the Scarlet Sun Demon Master. How could they have imagined that Jian Wushuang, who was only at the ruler realm, would have the cultivation to kill a half-step unparalleled supreme with a leap? All right, let's all calm down. Since Jian Wushuang is here, he'll naturally find a way to solve it. The Scarlet Sun Demon Master took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Report." At this moment, a divine general rushed in from outside the hall and entered it. "Your Majesty, Jian Wushuang is less than 3-star areas away from the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom. He will arrive within the next few days. The divine general raised his head and looked at the Scarlet Sun Demon Master with a terrified expression. It's so fast. The Scarlet Sun Demon Master's pupils shrank, and his expression changed slightly. Then, he stood up and looked at the people in the hall. He said coldly, "You guys stay here. I will bear all the punishment for Jian Wushuang." As soon as he finished speaking, the Scarlet Sun Demon Master stood up and walked out of the Imperial Palace under the complicated gazes of everyone in the hall. Before he could walk out of the palace, a deep and cold voice exploded in the sky above the entire Yunwu city. Jian Wushuang from the Divine Life Palace is here to pay a visit to the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom. His words were like a bombshell in the Great Sun Divine Kingdom. Countless people's expressions changed drastically. Their faces turned pale and their bodies trembled like screaming chaff. "He's here, he's here. Jian Wushuang is here." The Scarlet Sun Demon Master's eyes also lost color for a moment before he regained his calm. He took a step and landed on the city wall of the Scarlet Sun Royal City. After all, he was the man who stood at the peak of the universe. He had been a hero for a long time and had long been used to the ups and downs of the waves. Although Jian Wushuang was strong, he was not so strong that he would be afraid of him. "Jian Wushuang, I've been waiting for you for a long time." Scarlet Sun Demon Master looked at Jian Wushuang with a complicated gaze and said in a deep voice. He didn't call me by name anymore, which meant that he regarded Jian Wushuang as an equal. "Oh." Jian Wushuang came over with his black clothes fluttering in the wind. He squinted his eyes and asked, "You've been waiting for me for a long time?" The Scarlet Sun Demon Master nodded and replied, "Jian Wushuang, in this world, only the strong are respected. Back then, you were weak, so I bullied you. I was following the way of heaven. But now, you are stronger than me. Even if you come to me, I have nothing to say. I am willing to accept my punishment." "Hehe, you're quite frank." Jian Wushuang looked at him with a faint smile. Seeing that Jian Wushuang didn't express his opinion, Scarlet Sun Demon Master seemed to be struggling. He gritted his teeth and said, "Jian Wushuang, no matter how angry and murderous you are, I, Scarlet Sun, will bear it alone. Let my descendant go, and leave some leeway." After that, he saw that Jian Wushuang did not speak, so he took a deep breath, as if he had made a decision, and said again, "Jian Wushuang, as long as you don't vent your anger on my descendants and strip them of their cultivation, I am willing to commit suicide." As soon as he finished speaking, the people of Scarlet Sun who were watching the scene in the Imperial Palace held their breaths. They had never expected that the Scarlet Sun Demon Master would be willing to commit suicide for their sake. Even Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows slightly. On the path of cultivation, the further one cultivated, the more selfish and emotionless one would become. As long as one could cultivate the great Tao, an ordinary person could even cut off their parents and Tao companions to verify their Tao, let alone blood and kinship. There were very few people like the Scarlet Sun Demon Master who were willing to sacrifice themselves in order to preserve their bloodline. However, Jian Wushuang quickly understood. The Scarlet Sun Demon Master probably knew that he would not be able to escape today and was destined to die. In that case, it would be better to exchange his death for some bargaining chips, so that his death would be more valuable. After a moment of silence, Jian Wushuang looked at Scarlet Sun Demon Master and replied indifferently, "Yes." Upon hearing this, Scarlet Sun Demon Master heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Jian Wushuang with gratitude. "Many thanks." Then, the Scarlet Sun Demon Master turned his head and looked at his descendants and clansmen in the Imperial City who had long been in grief. He rebuked, "Remember, after I die today, you must keep a low profile, behave yourselves, and leave the depths of the universe. Cultivate well, and don't mention anything about revenge. Do you all understand?" The Scarlet Sun Demon Master's voice was like a blow to the head, exploding in the minds of every descendant and clansman. When these descendants heard this, they immediately understood that the Scarlet Sun Demon Master had already decided to die and was leaving behind his funeral arrangements. The burly man couldn't help but say, "No, no." Scarlet Sun Demon Master didn't care about them anymore. Instead, he looked at Jian Wushuang and laughed bitterly. "Jian Wushuang, remember your promise and let them go." Ill taste the consequences of the seed I planted that day. I, Scarlet Sun, will go. Bang! He stretched out his hand and hit his forehead. Chapter 44:32. Jian Wushuang's eyes closed slightly, Baoxiang solemn. The tailored Excalibur in his hand, as thin as smoke and sand, began to dissipate from the point of the sword. A feeling of palpitations suddenly amplified in everyone's heart. Good coercion. It will change. Rewind. Instantly, the audience members who had already retreated far away retreated backwards and opened the distance. Oh! Zun Bingxuan's eyes, which originally had no waves in the ancient well, narrowed for the first time, revealing a slight shock. The land under Wu Jianhua's feet began to collapse rapidly around him. A crater is constantly spreading out at a very fast speed, like a cosmic black hole that swallows everything silently and silently. Huge gravitational force is transmitted from the center of the vortex of the pit, and it continuously swallows all kinds of energy in the starry sky. All quietly next, it turns into nothingness. Even the sun that hangs high in the sky, and the dazzling Milky Way across the sky hundreds of millions of miles, is driven by this gravitational force, rolls in, and then falls into a giant pit. A sword at dusk, the gods at dusk. The ice mast, who was standing above the void and was constantly thinking about it, was suddenly pulled by a big hand, and was dragged into the pit instantly. Suddenly, the hearts of everyone watching the game shivered. In the face of this move, how can everyone not know that the original Yuding Supreme was dragged into the pit of the dusk, and then he lost his initiative? Without the power of World War I, he could only be used by the power of the pit of the dusk. Continue to pass away, and finally was executed by Jian Wushuang's four-season swordsmanship. Immediately, the strong face of the Taishu temple shouted sharply, "Sword unparalleled. Let our God Emperor come out. Yes. Otherwise, don't blame me for waiting." Wu Jian Wushuang heard the words, glanced at them scornfully, and sneered, "It's up to you." The words fell, Jian Wushuang stretched out his fingers and bowed a little, and suddenly a sharp sword blasted out from his fingertips, hitting the shouting loudest elementary supreme strong. Suddenly, this sword gas passed through the eyebrow of that elementary supreme power man. The sharp sword intention crushed every inch of the god's power in this person's body. Instantly, this elementary supreme power man, before he said a word, collapsed his body and destroyed him. Instant seconds. Suddenly, the other powerful men in the Taishu temple shrank their pupils and dared to reach out and tremblingly pointed at Jian Wushuang, but they did not dare to say a word. After finished all of this, Jian Wushuang turned his head, looked indifferently to the extreme icy supreme, and slowly extended his hand forward to grab the void. Buried. Boom. Suddenly, the pit at dusk turned on, and a powerful horror reached the extreme majestic strength, squeezing and colliding towards the ice mast supreme. Under this tremendous force of squeezing and collision, even though he is as strong as ice cricket, his body is shaking, and there is a little flush on both sides of his cheek. Next moment. Sword unparalleled. This trick is okay against others, but you can't trap me. Bing Extreme sits cross-legged, takes a deep breath, and then sighs coldly. Supernatural power, frozen world. Click. With this sentence falling down, the cold mang on Bingyu Supreme sword, and a piercing chill permeated by the naked eye pervaded, but the energy of the direct void was frozen. In the void, suddenly ice. For a short period of time, the ice dipper is sucked in the center, and the twilight pits that are squeezed continuously are frozen and frozen, just like eggshells. Bing stood up, a cruel arc evoked in the corner of his mouth. Supernatural power, skywing of ice. Broken. In an instant, Bingyu Supreme stepped on his feet and shot out of the dusky pit that was so deep that it rose into the sky. Beneath his feet, it was frozen into a glacier-like dusk pit, and suddenly collapsed and shattered, like a heavenly girl scattered flowers, forming a rolling avalanche and scattered around. It's not hard to see that with this hand alone, Bingyu Supreme is better than that supernatural powers, mirror flowers, and water moon. Bing Supreme reopened. Tear it. Sword of God in his hand waved down, time, starting from him, just like copy and paste, there were thousands of ice cream supreme like him. Sword unparalleled, let's die. The next moment, the words were sent out from the mouth of these thousands of ice cream supremacy, forming a terrifying sound wave, as if the gods opened their mouths and lowered their reproofs, making them deafening. Kill her. Then, the thousands of Ice Dipper Supremes stepped at the same time, holding a sword to kill from all sides. For a moment, the dreadful sword energy was as suffocating as the billowing waves. Is that so? Jian Jianhua's eyes narrowed, and he didn't dare to magnify his heart. He tried to spread his divine power and feel the thousands of Moraine Supremes, which one is the real body, but he couldn't help discovering them. Each of these Moraine Supremes, whether it is the strength of the divine power or the vitality of the breath, is all exactly the same. Unable to help, Jian Wushuang frowned. In the distance, the spectators watched the scene with scorching eyes. There is an old strong man who knows the Supreme Bingyu, and he suddenly said, Bingao Supreme's trick is different from those inferior avatars. It looks like a lot, but it has been defeated. In this trick, there is a full blow from Bingao Supreme in every fake. Absolutely cannot be underestimated. Ah! Then these tens of thousands of Bingyu Supreme avatars, isn't that Bingyu Supreme tens of thousands of full blows and use them at the same time? Suddenly, someone exclaimed. Yes. The veteran strong eye that had spoken before flickered nodded. This is not the most troublesome. The most troublesome thing is that the true Moraine Supreme is still hidden in it. Once Jian Wushuang is tired of coping, when his power is exhausted or his mind is exhausted, he will give Jian Wushuang a real fatal blow at any time. Prevention is inevitable. Avoid inevitable. When this remark came to an end, all the people watching each other looked at each other. Some said unbelievably, well, that doesn't mean that Jian Wushuang will die. The veteran strong nodded his head and shook his head and said, there is no absolute thing. If Jian Wushuang has any tricks and can kill these tens of thousands of clones at the same time, then this technique will be broken naturally. As soon as this remark came to an end, instead of having a happy face, everyone's face sank. These avatars of Bingyu Supreme are not those low-level avatars that are merely flower racks condensed with divine power, but each avatar contains the full power of Bingyu Supreme, and if the sword Wushuang wants to destroy it at the same time if there are thousands of avatars, it means Jian Wushuang, and it will have the power to hit the Ice Mastiff with extreme strength. How easy is it? Suddenly, those who are no match for the sword, such as Hao Ember, Juxing Shengzi, Water Witch Master, Apprentices, and Star Master, all clenched their fists tightly, and a heart reached his throat. At this moment, countless people were silent. Wu Jiansu has fallen into danger. Chapter 44-33. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of Ice Moth Supreme virtual shadows are flying away, killing the sword unparalleled. Wu Jianhuang's face sank, his eyes flashed with dignity, and he did not dare to have the slightest intention, and directly opened the strongest state of Chaos BA. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's pair of purple and gold eyes soared, and the eyebrow chuan became more and more prominent. On his body, a series of crisscross ancient patterns appeared. Broken. Wu Jianshuang yelled loudly, raised his fist and blasted towards one of the Ice Moth Supreme virtual shadows, and the majestic strength fell like a waterfall. Suddenly, the sky was shaking. That virtual shadow shattered one after another, and Jian Wushuang was also shaken, his face pale and uncertain. He didn't allow him to rest for a while, and the second ghost had already hit him. Qi Jian Wushuang had to sideways avoid. After half a column of incense, Wing Jian Wushuang gasped slightly, with a few more scars on his body, looking at the still overlapping Ice Mastiff, the Supreme Shadow, and his thoughts flashed. ICANT go on like this. Although each of these ghost images is not strong, and only contains the blow of the Supreme Ice Cream, there are too many ghost images. If you continue to fight like this, I'm afraid I will be dragged to death here. I took a deep breath, and Jian Wushuang did not hesitate again, and said lightly, Tora Sword Code times 4th Style times 4 Seasons. Howl dash. As soon as this remark came to an end, within a square of a circle centered around Jian Wushuang, it turned into long winter, countless snow falls, and shoots at that Ice Supreme virtual shadow. This is not over yet, Jian Wushuang yelled again. Talented, amazing life, talent of magic, primitive universe. Boom. Suddenly, two extremely powerful amounts of repression came to the world again. This world is completely controlled by Jian Wushuang. I saw the icy wind and snow transformed by the four seasons sword gas. Under the blessing of the primitive universe and the shock of life, the power suddenly rose again. The wind screamed, with Morihan's murderous power, fell on every path of the Ice Master Supreme. On the ghost card. Suddenly, the thousands of icy phantoms froze, and the action of attacking and killing the sword unparalleled became sluggish. This is. The Ice Mastiff, who was hidden among thousands of people, suddenly changed his face slightly. He also felt the strong force of ice cold. Under this ice-cold power, even his movements became a little slow. It is rumored that Taylor Supreme has left a total of 5 peerless methods to suppress the universe. This move should be one of Taylor Supreme's 5 masterpieces. 4 seasons sword energy. The thoughts of Bing Binks's eyes were quickly considered, and the contempt for Jian Wushuang in his heart gradually disappeared and turned into dignity. 4 seasons, turn. Qi Jian Wushuang quickly drew his hands and drank again. Suddenly, the severe cold snow disappeared, and a spring thunder blew out of nowhere. Then, countless drizzles fell from the sky. This drizzle directly covered the entire Taishu star field. There was doubt in the eyes of a strong man in Taishu Temple, and he reached for a drop of raindrops. Instantly, this raindrop pierced his entire palm. Not good. This is sword spirit. Rewind. Suddenly, the man shouted in surprise. Then, the Ice Mastiff Supreme Virtual Shadow, which was slightly frozen by the midwinter sword air, was dripped by this overwhelming raindrop, and it suddenly seemed to be cut open by a sword, making a bang, and then it broke apart. For a while, the dense raindrops dripped, like playing a lute in the universe, with small chords like whispers, noisy and miscellaneous bullets, and big beads and beads falling on the jade plate. Where is this spring rain? Obviously a disaster. Just a few breaths. Thousands of Ice Mastiff Supreme virtual shadows crumbled under the dense raindrops, leaving only the true Ice Master Supreme, constantly flying in the void, while avoiding sword air raindrops, while wielding a sword to resist. Dang 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 dang. The dense raindrops shot directly on the Ice Cream's Supreme Sword of God, and a sudden sound of iron nails hit the steel plate suddenly. The fine sweat beads swelled from the extreme forehead of Bing Bing, and the pair of ice crystal wings behind him kept waving, and they swept away thousands of feet under one wave. Although he responded to the Wolverine, it did not pose much threat to him. Bingao, it seems your strength is just that. Wu Jian Wushuang's expression was indifferent, with 5 fingers in one, sneer, 4 seasons, turn again, boom tilde. Suddenly, with the sword Wushuang's voice falling, the spring rain disappeared, and a blistering day climbed into the stars. There was a rush of heat waves, baking the earth, and the extremely high temperature was enough to bake a supreme adult. Bing Extreme, who was still a little loose, raised it again and looked at the fiery red sun. Walking in the middle of the huge sun, Jian Wushuang stepped into the void, black hair fluttered, and he looked down at the earth. Swordsmanship, his. If it weren't for today, I wouldn't have imagined that this magical power would have evolved from sword energy. Yu Ding Supreme is dead in this trick. I don't know if Bing Ling Supreme can survive. The strength of the sword unparalleled, terrible. The crowd watching from a distance exclaimed. Although they are far away from the sword Wushuang, the powerful surging energy, like the brightest star in the universe, makes them dazzled and convince. Stop it. Yang Jianhua's eyes flashed sharply, and he waved toward Bingyu with respect. Time. The round of fiery red sun behind Jianhua's body, rumblingly rolled, crushed away towards the supreme Bingyu. This trick is currently the most powerful attack of Jian Wushuang attack power. Sword warriors. Wu Bingyu looked at this rolling, as if the fiery red sun that was dying out of the world, and was instantly furious. Supernatural powers, ice wing protection. Bing extremely opened his mouth and growled. The next moment, I saw the wings that were inserted into his back and formed by the innumerable ice crystals, soared again, and finally, like the same pair of arms, he enveloped the supreme body of the ice moraine, forming an ice shell-like ice cover. The fiery red sun hit the mask formed by the icy supreme wings, and suddenly made a loud roar that could not be described in any word. This roar is like the anger of thunder, open mouth, shaking the world, and deafening. All the sounds are drowned in this huge roar. Countless people watching the war in the distance covered their ears, expression of pain. Even more people who are low profile will be killed directly by this roar. A wave of shock waves swept past, crushing the numerous temples in the Taishu temple under the stars directly into powder. This roar lasted for 3 full breaths before it gradually became weak and then disappeared. A huge cloud of mushrooms rose up from the place where Jian Wushuang and Bingyu played against each other, covering all directions. Chapter 44-34. Moraine Supreme fell. At this moment, countless spectators who have recovered have all stared at the place shrouded by that huge mushroom cloud. The sight of was blocked by the mushroom cloud, heavy haze. Even if they exerted their divine power, they could not see through it, and there was a quiet peace inside, without any sound of the Moraine Supreme. Master Bloodsword must have won. The leader is invincible. It is too strong not to abandon your excellency. Seeing this, the master of How Ember and others all couldn't help showing joy and shook his fists heavily. Other watchers are holding their breaths and are afraid to blink. Extreme. Has it fallen? 9 days in the void. Yang Jian Wushuang looked down at the place where the former Bingyu Supreme was, and there was no joy on everyone's face, but his brows gradually frowned. In the monstrous mushroom cloud, he did not feel the supreme breath of the ice mast. As usual, the general breath returned to nothingness, which means that this life machine has disappeared and has fallen. But somehow, Jian Wushuang not only did not feel any relaxation, but he felt a great terror between life and death. His entire body, as if stared at by an ancient and wild monster, was covered with sweat. At this moment, a dull sound of beating heartbeat rang in the mushroom cloud. As if someone sang the drums of Jiyu Tianting. Huh. This voice is getting louder and louder. At last. Roar. The thick mushroom cloud shrouded in thousands of miles was ripped apart. Extreme stride out. Suddenly his robe was torn, his hair was loose, and blood was flowing between his eyebrows. Even the wide wings condensed from ice crystals on the back were blown up. However, he was full of an extremely dangerous and violent breath. Frost froze on his blood-stained face, as if wearing a mask, condensing half of his face. Sword unparalleled, you can push this seat to this point. This seat has to say, underestimated you. Bing Extreme voice is hoarse, unlike humans, as if there are 2 iron pieces rubbing in his throat. It's just a pity that you killed Yu Ding with this trick, but you can't kill me. Qi Jian Wushuang didn't answer. Tai Luo Excalibur silently gathered in his hands, and his vigilance was raised to the extreme. Far away. How Ember, who had already begun to cheer, dominated the others, and the smile on his face gradually solidified. Isn't this dead? Bingao Supreme is worthy of being the strongest in the half-step invincible Supreme. Where is it so easy to fall? Jian Wushuang, there is trouble. And others sighed. Okay, sword unparalleled. This is the end of the game. Zun Bingxian raised his head to look at Jian Wushuang. The corner of his mouth evoked a weird arc next moment. Supernatural power. I am the emperor. Boom tilde. Suddenly, the Bingyu Supreme body skyrocketed steadily, and the whole person swelled up like an inflatable. 100,000 feet. For a short period of time, Bingyu Supreme Demon stood up and turned into a giant ice giant. The atmosphere of his whole person changed, as if heaven and earth had crowned him, and an emperor crown appeared on his head. He was covered with thick ice crystals all over his skin, as if wearing a heavy armor. He held in his hands a handle made of ice crystals, and a huge ice sword condensed in his hand. He holds the ice sword in his hand, as if holding an iceberg in his hand. At his feet, the sword unparalleled was as small as a cricket ant. Suddenly, countless people were horrified and startled. What magic power is this? I can feel that the current Bingyu Supreme is at least 10 times stronger than just now. No wonder the previous Emperor Taishu was willing to hand over the position to Bingyu Supreme and leave with confidence. It turned out that Bingyu Supreme hid such a killer. Before, I also said that Bingyu Supreme declared the universe and said that it would be too conceited to kill sword unparalleled here. Now it seems that where is this conceit? Obviously I have absolute confidence. And how Ember dominated the others, even more upset. Why, how could this be? Boom. Instantly, Bingyu moved. This move, he stepped on the ground directly, stepped tens of thousands of feet away, and stepped down towards the sword unparalleled. Sword warriors, the magical power of this seat is far from what you can imagine. Bing Extreme laughed lowly, revealing a sense of madness. Beneath this foot, the whole world seems to be under pressure, and every inch collapses. Qi Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and Shen-channeled, Dawn, cut. Wu Jiansu again turned into breaking Dawn Jianmeng, Yu Jian left, and stabbed on the calf supreme calf fiercely. This sword can cut off the gods. Ding tilde. Countless ice crystals splash, but it is even the layer of ice crystals on the skin of Bingyu Supreme, which cannot be pierced. Cut star. Qi Jian Wushuang did not hesitate to forgive, and the nearly 10,000 forest blue swordsmen gathered in his hands and chopped again. However, no, it's still useless. Everything is useless. Shock the tree, ridiculous. Zun Bingji shook his head with a scornful smile and swept his giant foot at will, directly throwing the sword masterpiece of magical powers, slamming it into the air. Wu Jianshuang flew out of his body, and a spit of blood was spit out by him. Come again. Wu Jian's eyes are so wary, his body is full of golden light, and the royal sword is heading towards Bingyu Supreme again. Taro Sword Code 4th Style 4 Seasons. In the void, the heavenly sword gasified into spring rain and came to the world. However, before it was still invincible, the 4 seasons of sword energy was destroyed, but it could only cut off the ice crystals on the top of Bingyu, causing no trace of injury. Stupid struggle. Bing Extreme smiled slightly, and stretched out the ice sword to cut it severely. Instantly, the whole world was filled with this sword. The gigantic air machine makes the universe boil, as if to reopen chaos and create a new world. 4 seasons sword chi is crushed directly. Boom tilde. Then, this sword fell on Jian Wushuang and blasted it. Under this sword, even if Jian Wushuang has a chaotic domineering body, it will collapse. Sword is unparalleled. It is not only you who is a genius in the world, nor is it only one person who possesses supernatural powers. Extremely raised the corners of his mouth. The magical powers of this seat have been cultivated for tens of thousands of years, and you can't catch up, can you understand? After a few breaths, Sword Wushu deity reorganized. He took a deep breath, stood up from the ground, and looked at the Ice Cream Supreme who was holding a winning ticket. His expression suddenly calmed down. Bingao, do you really win yourself? After hearing the words, Bing Bingxian browed slightly, and looked at Xiong Wushuang with an interest, and said, Oh? Jian Wushuang, what other means do you have to make use of it? This one is one by one. It is good. I answered him with Jian Wushuang's calm voice. Next moment, Wu Jianshou opened his hands, closed his eyes, and hugs the world. He had black hair and gradually floated. A quiet, slow voice, word by word, came out of his mouth. Taro Sword Code 5th Style Taro. Chapter 44-35. Jian Wushuang. Are you going to lose? Zhu Hao Emperor dominated the others, looking up at the trembling in the void, and constantly being stunned by the Ice Sword Supreme Master Fei Shuang. His heart was cold. The others are silent and have complex expressions. After a long while, they just sighed. Jian Wushuang is of course strong. Every magical power can be called cosmic extinction, but it's a pity that his practice period is too short, and the bottom line is too extreme. I dare to say that if Jian Wushuang practiced for another 10 million years, maybe Bingyu Supreme, he would not be Jian Wushuang's opponent. There is not much time to give Jian Wushuang. Countless people looked at each other with silence in their hearts. Qi Jian's unparalleled defeat has become a foregone conclusion. The disciples who were too vain and shivering looked at the immortal ice god, who was as high as thousands of feet. They were all excited and shouting, the ice god is invincible. Jian Wushuang how dare to fight against the Emperor Bingyu? The pearls of rice grains also shine. On the starry sky, Bingyu Supreme looks cold, like the of life and death, who is about to pronounce the death sentence of Jian Wushuang. At this moment, even through the Shuangguang mirror to watch the war, The people of the universe far away from here are shaking their heads and preparing to be sent back to the messenger who sent the gift to the Temple of Life. The sword is unparalleled, and it will die. This scene was staged in every corner of the universe at the same time. Until Taro Sword Code times 5th Taro. When the sword Wushuang's words fell, the whole universe starry sky, and at the same time, a loud bang. Not only the starry sky where Gen Wushuang fought with Bingyu Supreme, but the entire universe. Howling. The sky began to tear, and the wind raged suddenly, centering on Gen Wushuang, until it spread thousands of feet around, all turned into floating slaughterland. Countless people who watched the battle in the distance, all monks who practiced with swords, whether they hang their swords on their waists or lay quietly in the ring of Chenkuan. At this moment, they all send out a huge clearing, countless sword spirits, straight into Zhouxiao. As if greeted, the ancient sword who is about to die. Pedal the void, stretched out his hand to embrace the sword unparalleled in heaven and earth. The breath changed a little. His breath, become strange, become sharp, and become flying. This. The ice crystal giant sword lifted by Zun Binx's supreme stagnation, his brows frowned. The appearance of Wu Mingming sword Wushuang has not changed. Standing in front of his eyes, Mingming sword Wushuang is still in the elementary state of supremacy. But somehow, on Gen Wushuang, he suddenly revealed a breath that made him feel scared. Has not sword warrior. There was an idea in Bingbing's supreme heart that made him feel incredible. Stop him. Although I don't know what happened to Gen Wushuang, Bingyu Supreme can feel that Gen Wushuang at this moment is extremely dangerous. Go to hell. Bing Extreme chuckled, the ice crystal giant sword in his hand, as if the mountain collapsed and crushed, chopped away towards the sword unparalleled. Huh. This sword is extremely fast. And sword unparalleled, as if stupid, closed his eyes tightly, waiting motionlessly for the sword to fall. When I saw this scene, many disciples in the Taishu temple were laughing. Ha ha ha, what do I think Gen Wushuang is holding on to? Is it just waiting to die? Pretend. Even Bingyu is supreme, and her slightly nervous mind is also a loose one. The sword is about to fall on the sword Wush's head. Boom. Yang Zhen's unparalleled eyes opened suddenly. Two shocking gods, skyrocketing from his eyes. Countless immortals circled up, just like the arrival of the heaven and earth monarchs. Countless starlights came from all directions, enveloped the sword's peerless body in a bright starlight, and the whole person was full of divinity. In the distance, the myriad swords that shook the heavens and the earth were trembling madly, and even the respective sword masters lost their induction and could not be recalled. This is. In countless people's horrified stunned eyes, Gen Wushuang slowly opened his mouth, a deep, hoarse, but extremely sharp voice issued from Gen Wushuang's mouth. Imtaro. Huh. The Tianmen gate suddenly opened wide, a golden light beam fell from the air, and on the back of the sword unparalleled, formed a virtual reality wearing a blue shirt, walking on a sword, holding a gourd drunken the whirl. Saw the ice crystal sword that was chopped down and crush it directly. What? How did this happen? Bing Extreme expression dull. This figure, he couldn't be more familiar. Isn't he too supreme or who? 23 centuries before the Chaos era, Tyro Supreme used a top-level supreme practice to sweep the universe invincible, and he was undefeated after many battles, suppressing 9 days and 10 places. He is not invincible, it is better than invincible. And he Bingyu Supreme was also the top supreme practice that year, using sword to enlighten. At that time, he was trying out the sword world, using many kendo giant arms as stepping stones to merge his kendo. At that time, the supreme master Tai Luo was like the sun and the sky. How could he let it go? He battled with Taro Supreme on the top of the universe, but in that battle he was defeated. Just ordinary sword. Extreme defeat. From then on, Tai Luo Supreme became the nightmare of Bingling Supreme. The reason why he has such a strong murderous power against Gen Wushuang is that no less than half of this factor. How is that possible? What is going on? Bing Extreme eyes stared at Gen Wushuang, yelling constantly. The breath from Wu Jianhua's body made him feel a little suffocated and almost suffocated, his body trembling, which was not comparable to him at all. In the distance, more people are stiff. Looking at this scene like a lightning strike, the thoughts in my head roll and set off a stormy sea. Taro Supreme. This is the breath of Taro Supreme, yes. Taro Supreme has not yet fallen, and the old man has had the pleasure of meeting him. I can be extremely determined. This is the breath of Taro Supreme. An old strong took a deep breath, said solemnly. There was also the old friend who once had a relationship with Tai Luo, and Laroti said, Dao Luo Dao friends, 300 chaotic pre-epochs, is the separation of life and death. I thought I would never see each other again in this life. Gather. Countless people lamented. But more people wonder, what is going on? This answer is only known by Jian Wushuang. 9 days above. The sword has no double-sided expression, and looks down at Bingyu Supreme, indifferently saying, Now, who are ants? Powerful momentum and decompression, crazily crisscross, the pressed ice cricket Supreme gradually kneel and lay on the ground. No. Taro Supreme is dead. You cannot be Taro Supreme. I don't believe it. Wu Bingxian clenched his fist tightly, his teeth biting. Next moment. Swords warriors. Do not say that you are not Tu Luo, even if you are Tai Luo Supreme. Today I am iced, I will kill you. Roar. The extreme insanity was revealed in the supreme eyes of Bing Bing, and his body was standing up inch by inch under the pressure of the sword. Immediately, he patted his right hand fiercely into the void, and the whole man leaped and killed towards the sword unparalleled. Supernatural power, destruction. Chapter 44-36. Roar. At this moment, Bingyu Supreme burned with divine power, and the whole person was full of danger to the extreme. Every step he took, he stepped out of a pit in the void, and made a loud popping sound. Come on. Jian Wushuang. I can't live, you die for me. Bingyu Extreme laughed wildly, eyes full of endless madness. He hated Tai Luo Supreme. At the time, he had cultivated with him in the same way, but he was much stronger than him, asking the top of the universe. He hated the sword unparalleled, his talent is extraordinary, and it is rare in the ancient world. He is so low as to be low, but he can still fight with him, forcing him to fight with death. How unfair the sky is. There is a Taro Supreme, and a sword unparalleled. Why hasn't he spoiled him forever? Bingyu Extreme approached madly, and his body swelled like a bomb about to explode. It was extremely dangerous. No. Let's retreat. Bingyu Extreme is desperate. In this blow, Bingyu Supreme has been determined to die. He is going to pull his sword to end with him. Crazy and crazy, Bingyu Supreme is completely crazy. At this moment, countless people watching the battle in the distance were crazed and angered to the extreme. You must know that the destructive power of Bingyu Supreme is the most powerful forbidden technique of the Taishu Temple, which not only destroys the enemy, but also destroys itself. The power that erupted at that instant was enough to draw them into destruction. Ha 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 ha, want to escape? Anyone who comes today will die. Seeing this, Bingyu Extreme laughed loudly, quickly printed his hands with his hands, and directly applied the Fengtian divine art, which would ban the 100,000 miles of the surrounding sky. Those spectators who were retreating suddenly seemed to hit an invisible wall. The action of retreating and escaping was instantly delayed. Suddenly, many cosmic powers of the universe who watched the battle through the Xuanguang mirror became extremely blue. Temple of Life, Supreme Temple. Bloodwave Supreme, Giant Axe Supreme and others raised their heads and stared at the Xuanguang mirror. A solemn, quiet needle can be heard. And just after Bingyu Supreme cast his destructive power, Jack. Bloodwave Supreme got up sharply and stood up, with 3 inches of sharp eyes in his eyes. This Bingyu Supreme has lost his mind in order to kill the sword unparalleled. Regardless of the consequences, he really should kill. The other great masters, although not speaking, were also grimly dripping water. This scene, similar to the Temple of Life, is constantly being performed in the core of the universe. On the starry sky of Taishu Temple, there was a sound of horror begging for mercy. No. Let us go. Bingao Supreme, your goal is Jian Wushuang, it has nothing to do with us. Yes. It's good if you look for Sword Wushuang. Someone tried to arouse Bingyu's supreme reason. Bingao, if you do this, You will pull the entire Taishu temple into the endless place. Stop it now. There are also attempts to threaten Moraine Supreme. However, the supreme sight of Bingyu, however, made him laugh more and more crazy. Ha ha ha, are you scared? If you don't want to be buried with me, it's easy, then you can kill swordsman with me. When this remark came to an end, everyone shivered. Immediately, a few people looked at Jian Wushuang, their eyes struggling. And the sword Wushuang, which belongs to the center of destruction, was indifferent, expressionless, unhappy or sad. Facing the imminent Bingyu extreme, Jian Wushuang's black hair flew, starlight lingered around him, and uttered a word calmly. Cut. At the next moment, Jian Wushuang slowly raised his hand, and the tailored Excalibur held by him held up. Behind him, the huge Taro Supreme virtual shadow, just like the shadow of the sword unparalleled, like the shadow follows, raises his hand and makes the sword-cutting action. At this moment, Jian Wushuang and Tai Luo Supreme merged. Puff. Suddenly, a crimson sword mang cut from the Taro Excalibur. Rumble. Billowing thunder. No words can be used to describe this extremely beautiful sword. As if the universe was split open to both sides, the sky was torn apart like a scroll. The endless sky of the sky was torn directly into a jagged mouth and turned into a broken void hole. As Qianlong ascended to the sky, as Qianhe rolled down, this sword, covering the sun and the moon, swept across the sky. This sword is enough to make the peoples bow their heads and suppress all dissatisfaction. After the sword was cut, whether it was the gigantic laughter of Bingyu Supreme, or the voices of spectators who beg for mercy or threats, all stopped abruptly. Everyone was holding their breath, watching it blankly, which filled the entire starry sky, and became a dazzling sword. This sword, the power of Huang Huang, is not visible. Puff. The next moment, the sword was cut like a tofu, and passed straight through the huge chest of the Ice Supreme. Bingyu Supreme still keeps her footsteps and strides forward. However, on his chest, a huge hollow with thick feet appeared directly. No blood spills, no divine power dissipates, no ice crystals splash. This sword directly annihilated everything that Bingyu Supreme. Bingyu Extreme's huge body fell to his knees. He lowered his head and stared blankly at the gradual hollowing of his chest. I lost. Ha 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 ha. His body diminished quickly, returning to its normal state, and the ice crystals covering his skin dissipated like sand. He could feel that at this moment, his majestic vitality and majestic power were quickly dissipating. The world in front of him quickly turned black, and he saw Jian Wushuang suddenly weakened to the extreme after wielding the sword. The Taro Supreme virtual reality on his back had collapsed inch by inch. If you shoot at this time, you can definitely kill the sword without double-clicking. But he had no chance. Just when he thought he was about to die, a sigh sounded in the heavens and the earth. Bingao, you let this seat down. The next moment in this void, I saw a middle-aged man wearing a crown, wearing a black gold nine-claw dragon robe, wearing a purple gold crown, and looking courageous, bathed in thunder, step out of the void. To Emperor God. The real master behind the Taishu Temple is also the heavenly power to open the Taishu Temple, invincible and supreme. Suddenly, because the crisis was lifted, everyone in the heart breathed a sigh of relief and exclaimed, "The sword is unparalleled, and that's it." In the eyes of the Emperor Taishu, the thunderous light flickered, and he looked slightly towards the body supported by the tailored Excalibur, drained of divine power, and the shaky sword Wushuang. His words were bland, but filled with an unquestionable power. Cough cough. Jian Wushuang coughed violently and raised his head, looking at the Emperor Taishu, the true power of the universe, standing at the peak of the universe. Chapter 44-37. To Emperor God. The pioneers of the Taishu Temple really opened up the territory and suppressed the power of the universe. In the entire universe, he can be compared with him, but the number of hands is not a tribe of ancestors, or the ruler of the immortal Holy Land. After he appeared, the entire noisy universe was suddenly dead. Everyone was too dare to look at the Emperor Taishu and lowered his head. Jian Wushuang, this seat is nothing but entanglement between you and you. From now on, all the past will be written off. How? Emperor Taishu looked at Zhen Wushuang indifferently and said. After that, he waved his sleeves. The Moringa Supreme, which was dying out, recovered quickly at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Bingyu Supreme first glanced at Zhen Wushuang viciously, then immediately looked at Emperor Taishu, and his eyes were full of fear. Master God, he shivered and just wanted to open his mouth to speak. The words just came out, and I saw the Emperor Taishu coldly gave him a sideways glance, scolding, is it not enough to be ashamed? Go back, and then go to the extraterritorial battlefield with this seat later. Seeing this Taishu God Emperor, Bingyu Supreme, just like a mouse seeing a cat, he suddenly trembled when he heard the words, and looked at Zhen Wushuang with a resentful glance. Zhen Wushuang struggled to stand up from the sky. Looking at this scene, his face suddenly became extremely ugly. He managed to slay the Bingyu Supreme today, but he did not expect that the Emperor Xuanxu was killed in the air and rescued the Bingyu Supreme. If you can't kill Bingyu Supreme today, I'm afraid that you will kill Bingyu Supreme in the future. Taking a deep breath, Zhen's eyes flashed and said, Master, Emperor Bingyu, 3 or 5 times, he wants to put me to death, and it is the main force that pacifies the life shrine twice. I do not know how many disciples die in life. You are too vain in the hands of the temple. You are now a bit too light about it. I senti it a bit too light. Oh! Emperor Taishu raised a brow when he heard his words, as if he was surprised that Zhen Wushuang dared not follow his instructions, and his voice became cold, and he replied, Zhen Wushuang, are you in this seat to discuss with you? Huh. The voice fell, and a momentum like a mountain broke out from the Emperor Taishu. Moment. Zhen Wushuang was smashed by this momentum, and immediately, as if hit by a sledgehammer, the whole person fell to the ground fiercely, and the body almost shattered. This momentum came fast and went fast, and in just one breath, it was taken back by the Emperor Taishu. He glanced down on the ground, his face became incredibly pale. Zhen Wushuang said coldly, Zhen Wushuang, if this seat was not in the face of the old senior Gav just now, this one will kill you. Zhen Wushuang was lying in the void. Although the spirit of the Emperor Taishu had been withdrawn, invisibly, as if there was still a big mountain pressing on his back, he couldn't stand up. Is this the power of invincibility? Zhen Wushuang clenched his fists tightly, and his eyes were filled with endless humiliation. He thought he had broken through the supremacy, and he dared not say that he could run across the universe. At least he had a little self-protection. But only at this moment, when he truly faced the invincible Supreme, did he know how small he was. He was in front of Emperor Taishu, just like Bingyu Supreme was in front of the patriarchs, and he had no resistance at all. The gap between the half-step invincible Supreme and the invincible Supreme is too big. Emperor Taishu looked at Zhen Wushuang, and gradually sneered at the corners of his mouth, and said, Sword Wushuang, this seat looks at your eyes, do you seem to disagree? Zhen Wushuang did not answer. In the face of absolute power, all words are pale. Emperor Taishu shook his head and said, if you are unconvinced, you can wait for your recovery and come to the extraterrestrial battlefield to find me. This seat is waiting for you. After that, Emperor Taishu would leave. However, he just turned around and seemed to think of something again. He stepped out and said, swords are unparalleled. Look at GVS Supreme face. I would like to remind you that you act low-key and your strength has not allowed you to. This universe is rampant. This universe is much wider than you think. You think you are talented and fighting across borders is enough to be proud and arrogant. It's just that your vision is too small and limited by cultivation. See this side of the world. In this universe, Mo said that your sword Wushuang is nothing. Even this seat is just a drop in the ocean. The true strong and Tianjiao, you are not qualified to see it now. Having said that, the Emperor Taishen narrowed his eyes, and a radian of unintelligible radiance was drawn at the corners of his mouth, suppressing the sound to a decibel that only the two of them could hear, one word at a time. Zhen Wushuang, do you think that when the universe was invincible, how did Tai Luo Supreme, who was proud of himself, die? As soon as this remark was made, Zhen Wushuang was shocked. Emperor Taishu shook his head and said, okay, the sword is unparalleled. Now Gap is supremely asleep. You do nt even have a beam carrying a beam in your temple of life. Do nt let it be because of your humble life like dust. The temple of life behind it has caused a great disaster. After speaking, Emperor Taishu looked at Jian Wushuang a bit with disgust and playfulness, and without further ado, disappeared into the starry sky in one step. With the departure of Emperor Taishu, this battle finally came to a successful end. Victory. Master Blood Sword wins. Extreme Ice Cricket, lost to Sword Incomparable. Suddenly, Hao Emperor, who was close to Jian Wushuang, dominated the crowd and cheered. The other strong men who came to watch the war were also in awe. They rushed up, embracing the sword unparalleled in the middle, saying the words of flattery. However, Jian Wushuang's heart was not happy at all. Is this winning? Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly in his heart. The last word of Emperor Taishu was like a bombshell that exploded in his mind. Seriously, have you not seen the real universe? At this moment, the universe that he originally thought was clear had suddenly become blurred, and seemed to have a mysterious veil. And how did Taro Supreme, who was so powerful back then, die? According to the remnant thought of Supreme Master Tai Luo, it seems to be related to a person called Emperor. Who is this Emperor? Endless thoughts flowed, but Jian Wushuang couldn't figure it out, so he shook his head and said silently, weak. After all, I'm still too weak. Chapter 44-38. Master Bloodsword. Do you have any thoughts? The master of Hao Hao noticed the incompatibility of Jian Wushuang and raised his doubts and asked. Jian Wushuang didn't talk back, but Hao Ember dominated it like he guessed something, and laughed. Master Bloodsword, you can use the elementary supreme practice to defeat the half-step invincible supreme ice mast. It's already very powerful. That's too hypocritical. You do need to be attentive to what God says. Wu Zhenshou smiled and did not answer. He just looked up at the starry sky of Wudi with a negative hand, thinking in his eyes. Extraterritorial battlefield. He was very keen to capture the word extraterritorial battlefield in the mouth of Emperor Taishu. He is no stranger to these 4 words. As soon as he broke through the Supreme, Bloodwave Supreme had mentioned it in a vague manner. The Outland Battlefield is a battlefield located at the edge of the universe. Therefore, the cosmic preaching of the universe appears to be extremely rare, because the universe sits in the extraterrestrial battlefield all year round, and rarely returns to the depths of the universe. Moreover, according to the Supreme Master of Blood, the owner of the Palace of Life's Shrine went to the extraterritorial battlefield before returning without news. In addition, most of the invincible supremes in the universe are basically gathered in extraterritorial battlefields. Extraterritorial. Wu Zhensu continued to ponder, what does this outside mean? After a short while, the swordless two-way Hao Emperor and others bid farewell and left Taishu Temple. However, instead of going to the Daewu Temple and the Dragon Race, he set up a cosmic boat and sailed towards the Temple of Life. 23 days later. The sword-cutting ice supreme thing spread throughout the universe. Suddenly, the universe was trembling again and it was boiling. The powerful people of the universe are even more uproar. Then they couldn't sit still, and went to the Temple of Life to form a war alliance with the Temple of Life. Then, the details of the battle between Jian Wushuang and Bingyu Supreme spread through the entire universe through the Shuangguang mirror. Countless people watched this battle with interest, marveled at it, and made a terrible case. The talent of the sword is unparalleled, the sword skill is outstanding, and it is rare in all ages. Sword warriors will become the second Taro Supreme. No. When Tai Luo Supreme was in the realm of Jian Wushuang, he was far less powerful than Jian Wushuang. You said, how was Jian Wushuang's last move released at the time? Could it be that Tai Lu Supreme was really not dead? Or was Jian Wushuang reincarnated? For a moment, all kinds of strange discussions were all uproar. The universe is full of discussions about the sword unparalleled. Unconsciously, Jian Wushuang has already become a legend that makes others look up. Sunstar Field, home of the Jinwu family. 9 fireballs practiced into a line, revolving around an extremely huge sun. Here is the old nest of the Jinwu family. The huge sun in the middle is the palace of Emperor Jinwu. Jian Wushuang, can you be able to slay half-step invincible supreme? Emperor Jinwu stood erect in the sun, staring at the distant starry sky for a moment. Once upon a time, the two still had a battle in the ancient sky, and he has been working hard to improve himself, so that one day, he can fight against Jian Wushuang again. He was retreating when Jian Wushuang attended the Grand Cosmos event. When Jian stepped on the four forces, he was in retreat. Now, he is finally out of customs. Zun became the second supreme of Jinwu tribe after King Jinwu. He thought that he had broken through the supreme, and he had the power to resist with the swordless chamber. As a result, when he vowed, ready to go out to find Sword Wushuang, he heard the news that Jian Wushuang's sword chopped ice. What kind of character is Bing Bing? The famous half-step invincible supreme in the universe, the master of the dominant power. Regarding strength and reputation, he is not even under his father, King Jinwu, and is even stronger. The result is such a great power. If it wasn't for the Emperor Shu Xia arrived, he would have been killed by Jian Wushuang. Is this swordsman? The Emperor Jin Wu murmured to himself, only felt that the more he understood Jian Wushuang, the more he felt that the gap between the two was too big, and even to the point where he could hardly look back and looked up. Crackling. At this moment, a footstep sounded behind him. He is the Emperor Jinwu, walking step by step from the depths of the palace. He saw Emperor Jinwu's glance at Emperor Jinwu and then said, "Liana, pack up quickly, and go to the Temple of Life with your father." What? The Emperor Jinwu heard a word and wondered, "Father, what are we going to do at the Temple of Life?" The Emperor Jinwu glared at him and replied, "Isn't it going to help you wipe your in the past? It was in the Shinkong ancient road that you had a festival with Jian Wushuang. It was because of the god's thoughts left on you. Save it." Although this matter has passed a long time, and it is not too much resentment, but no one knows whether Jian Wushuang is a revenge and regretful person. Today, the sword unparalleled sword is invincible in half a step, and it has become a great climate. The title is unparalleled. When it comes to strength, he is not even his father's opponent. His wrists can't beat him. Naturally, he must rush to the door to apologize. This resentment, if he does not remember it, can be regarded as a good destiny. When the Emperor Jin Wu heard a shock, Jian Wushuang was already so strong that he needed his father and he had to come to the court to please him. Well, don't think too much about it. Everyone has his own life. Jian Wushuang is a rare evil in all ages. What do you compare with him? Emperor Jinwu smiled a little, patted Emperor Jinwu's shoulder and smiled, "Go, let me go to the Temple of Life." Prince Jinwu nodded gently. And similar to the above scene, is constantly being staged in the universe. Inside the universe starry sky, Wu Jianshou drove the spacecraft, riding the wind and waves all the way, flying fast. He didn't rush back to the Temple of Life, but went to the glacier forbidden area in the far north of the universe to pick up the cold frost. After that, he rushed back to the Temple of Life. For him, it is already his limit to make the sword press the ice supreme. The Daewu Shrine and the Dragon Clan are all behemoths with invincible supreme-level power to sit in town. The Black Feather Supreme of the Daewu Temple can only be regarded as the bottom of the Invincible Supreme, but it is also the true Invincible Supreme, definitely not a sword incomparable. And the dragons are not to mention, just 3 generations of bloodline dragons, they are all Invincible Supreme cultivation, rumors that there are 2nd-generation dragons sleeping. The 3rd generation of dragons is invincible and supreme. What is the concept of the 2nd generation of dragons? Wu Jiansu thought, very scared. Coupled with the words of Emperor Taishu, Emperor Zhenshuang has made a decision in his heart. Instead of taking risks and standing himself under a dangerous wall, it is better to improve his strength first. When we really destroy them, it will be crushing and crushing, cutting grass and roots, leaving no room for it. Chapter 4439. Jian Wushuang has returned to the Temple of Life for 3 months. There was a constant stream of people who came to visit him. These people are either the Lord of one holy land or the Emperor who opened up the kingdom of God. They are all lame, and the whole universe will shake the power of heaven. At the beginning, Jian Wushuang was quite patient. He talked with them about brewing wine, and he was very polite, but after a long time, he found that he had no time to practice, so he closed the door and refused to let the other Supreme of Life Shrine go with it. Chat. Life Shrine, the sixth mountain. Inside the sword unparalleled manner. Bloodwave Supreme and Great Axe Supreme come to the guest. The three of them sat by the lake beside the manor, and made a cup of spirit tea for the three as cold as frost, and they resigned gracefully without affecting the three's conversation. Extreme Blood, I have always had 3 questions to ask you, and I want to ask you to help me out. Wu Jinshuang said. Okay. Shu Bobo Supreme raised his eyebrows and quipped, Zhen Wushuang, you have been the hottest person in the universe recently. Do you still have anything to ask me? After a long pause, Bloodwave Supreme smiled. Well, if you have any questions, just ask directly. Why should we be so polite between us? Zhen Wushuang nodded his head, and after groaning for a second or two, he slowly opened his mouth and asked, Extreme Blood, what is the universal battle of catastrophe? What is the extraterrestrial battlefield? Also, when Tai Luo Supreme was extremely prosperous, rarely meet rivals in the universe, who will kill him in an instant? Even the kingdom of God is destroyed together. Shuebwa Supreme heard the words, looked at the giant axe Supreme, and did not rush to answer, but his expression gradually became dignified. After a long time, Shuebwa Supreme said, Zhen Wushuang, even if you don't ask these things, this seat was originally intended to tell you. Since you asked today, then this seat will give you confusion first. When it comes to the Holocaust, I have to tell you about the universe first. Zhen Wushuang, do you think the universe is unique? When Zhen Zhenshuang heard this, he couldn't help but start a deep breath and calmly replied, I don't know, but the universe I see is the only one. Bloodwave Supreme said took the lingcha at the table and took a sip, then said, before that catastrophe, all of us, like you, thought that the universe was the only one until the Battle of Havoc is coming. 100,000 prehistoric times of chaos suddenly appeared in the edge of the universe with a big slap in the void. At the beginning, everyone didn't take the void crack as a thing, and it went on for a long time until a man with 3 heads and 6 arms crawled out of the void crack. This man claims to be the true queen, from another universe. He is terrible and terrible. Obviously only the Supreme can cultivate, but he can slaughter the Supreme, and there is no room for a backhand. Even the half-step invincible Supreme is not his opponent. It is a celebration of heaven to be able to pick up a life in his hand. After this true queen came to the universe, he immediately launched a killing, and brought a storm in the universe. Numerous races were annihilated by him, and countless powers died in his hands. For a moment, the entire universe was filled with sorrow and Sorrowland of smoke. He could not use any words to describe the tragic universe at that time. After a pause, Bloodwave Supreme looked at Xiongjian Wushuang, sighed lightly, and said, It is a pity that Zedong, who was the first day of 100,000 chaos prehistoric times, also died in his hands. Falling down, I'm afraid that at this moment is already the ultimate power of the universe standing at the peak. Speaking of which, Bloodwave Supreme is a little bitterly sighing. Wu Jian Wushuang heard that his pupils shrank, and the first master of the 100,000 pre-chaos prehistoric world, the previous master of the Wuchang Chaos Tripod, had fallen like this? Thought of this, Zhen Wushuang could not help feeling a pity. At this time, Bloodwave Supreme continued to speak. At this time, we finally realized that there was another parallel universe beside our universe. And this universe, we call it virtual. Virtual? Zhen Jianhua's eyes narrowed, and there was a flash of light in his eyes. The giant axe nodded and said in a deep voice, Yes, because their practice is completely different from ours, and they rely on an empty spirit, so we call them the virtual universe. The monks in the virtual universe, on the whole level, are better than us in the same realm. Therefore, they are also particularly difficult. Is that so? Zhen Wushuang raised an eyebrow and thoughtfulness appeared in his eyes. Sword unparalleled, the battle of catastrophe was caused by this man called True King. At that time, he strangled the universe, and was finally noticed by the strongest in the universe. A total of 3 invincible supreme shots and suppressed him. However, RAO still allows this person to perform mystery, escape from serious injuries, and return to the virtual universe. In the universe, there is peace. And just after the 7 Chaos era that this man escaped, The void crack that had been mended by power was torn again. Thousands of people in the virtual universe crawled out of the cracks. Our entire universe is suddenly caught in the boundless flames of war, and the entire universe is filled with fierce water. This battle is known as the War of Holocaust. Hearing here, Jian Wushuang finally understood. Just by imagination, he could imagine how terrible the catastrophe that swept the entire universe. What happened then? How was this battle calmed down? Jian Wushuang continued to ask. Shu Shuebua Supreme heard the smile, raised his head to look at the sky, and a look of admiration flashed in his eyes. Later the Lord of the Gods rises among the tens of thousands of people, and Fu building immediately falls, turning the tide into a slum. The victory and defeat of this battle was established in one fell swoop. Under the leadership of Master God, this battle has finally been reversed. We defeated the monks in the universe. It is precisely because of this battle that the name of the first person in the universe was established. We call him the of the universe. Wu Jian Wushuang heard the words and couldn't calm down for a long time. If you want to come to that era, it must be a time of epic generation, bright stars, and a magnificent epic era, right? Zun Shuebua Supreme saw a slight smile, took up Lingcha, and blew the rising heat of Lingcha, and laughed. Sword warriors, the extraterrestrial battlefield you asked before is the product of this war. Although the monks of the void universe were led by us to kill them back, but the fissure in that void has not been closed. Until now, from time to time, there are still powerful men in the void universe who want to come in through that crack. However, there is a person who is sitting in the town personally, and there are several invincible and supreme perennial inspections. Generally, people who have no virtual universe can truly enter our universe. Wu Jian Wushuang heard the words, and after thinking about it for one or two, he arched to Bloodwave Supreme. Thank you Bloodwave Supreme for your confusion, I understand. You're welcome. Zun Shuebua Supreme nodded, put down the teacup in his hand, and replied, Next, I will tell you how Taylor Supreme has fallen. Chapter 4440. Temple of Life, 6th Mountain. Inside the sword unparalleled manner. The misty waves on the Great Lake of Yunza are small, a little white mist rises from the surface of the lake, and then spreads out. The water and the sky are all colored. Wu Jianshuang and Bloodwave Supreme were sitting on the bow of a awning boat. The awning boat automatically swayed on the lake without wind, drawing two long, calm water marks. The three sword-making swordsmen, Bloodwave Supreme, and Giant Axe Supreme boil tea and burn incense, but also quite elegant. The sword is unparalleled. Taro Supreme was extremely strong at that time. He was famous in all directions. His fall in the universe is not a big secret, but it rarely spreads in the universe. At first, he was afraid of spreading the truth by distorting the truth. Because of the fear of getting people's hearts frightened, all of them are at risk. Zun Shuebua Supreme lifted up the wide, long-sleeved cuffs, raised the ceramic teapot, and poured 2 cups of tea for the swordsman and Giant Axe. The watercolor is green, and an aura is mixed with the light tea fragrance. This cup of tea is very valuable. If an ordinary mortal drink a cup, it will be able to transform into an immortal and immortal. Even if they are supreme, drinking is still a whole body, and the power is nourished. People's heart. Wu Jianwu lifted the teacup and took a sip, then frowned and asked, Extreme blood, what does this mean? Zun Shuebua Supreme replied, Tao Supreme, it was not killed by people in our universe. Jian Wushuang heard the words, and suddenly his eyes narrowed, his eyes flashed sharply. Blood Supreme, do you mean, Supreme Tai Luo died in the hands of the virtual universe? Bloodwave Supreme nodded his head, his expression gradually swelled with a heavy expression, and said, Yes, 300 years before the chaos, suddenly there was a group of strong men who called themselves phasing. The universe, the head of their organization, is called the Emperor. At that time, Tai Luo Supreme, who was preparing to take turns to suppress the battlefield outside the territory, happened to meet them in the universe. So, as soon as the battle broke out, Fang entered the most stalemate situation at the beginning. No one knows the specific details of that battle, only knowing that the days were like the sky, and and the battle was undefeated. The Supreme Master Taro, who reached the peak of the universe, suddenly died suddenly. Subsequently, the kingdom of Tai Luo was smashed into the door, and the hundreds of millions of souls in God were killed in one fell swoop. The Supreme Tai Luo could only slap the Tai Luo divine sword into the depths of the universe before he died. Taro ruins. Then, it was Lord Elder God who arrived and killed the Bite organization, but it is worth mentioning that the Emperor was the one who won 3 defeats against Lord Elder God without defeat. With the phasing organization retreat safely. Is that so? Jian Wushuang's brow frowned tightly, his eyes blinked constantly. Wu Tailuo's supreme power, others don't know much, but Jian Wushuang and him have been in the trial space for thousands of years, he can't understand it. Jain is a dictatorship of eternity. Kendo shines in the power of the night. Few people can overcome him in the universe, let alone kill him. There is no chance of escape. Zun Shuebwa Supreme continued to say, Jian Wushuang, speaking of the disaster that occurred in the Joey starfield that year, it seems to be the phasing organization. Is it them? Wu Jiansu suddenly panicked, and his eyes skyrocketed. In that year, the annihilation disaster of Joey starfield naturally remembered that if it wasn't for the heartbreaking Supreme and others who arrived, I'm afraid he would fall into Joey starfield that day. I just heard that the group of mysterious black robes seemed to have come for the sake of their master Shen. Wu Jian's thoughts flashed like electricity, and he instantly grasped several key points. Devour the Emperor, the virtual universe, the extraterrestrial battlefield, the of the universe, and his own master Xuani. These characters, who seem to have nothing to do with each other, are invisible, with a faint line connecting them together. At the grand event of the universe, the of the universe told him that his master Xuani was his old friend and was in the next big picture. So, what is the purpose of this overall situation? His master Xuani, what identity does he play in the overall situation? His sword is unparalleled, what is his identity? Wu Jianwushuang fell into silence, and his eyes kept thinking. He began to remember himself and Xuani, from the beginning to the present, thinking about the bits and pieces of Xuani. After a long time, Jian Wushuang took a long sigh, with countless confused colors in his eyes, looked up at woody starry sky, and shook his head. Master, what do you want? Blood Supreme and Great Axe noticed this scene, and looked at each other, and said, What is wrong with you? Nothing. Jian Wushuang turned his head and smiled at them. After a short while, Supreme Bloodwave and Great Axe Supreme left. Wu Jianshou sat alone at the bow of the awning boat, frowning into a long thought. Fu Jun the cold, frosty figure appeared on the back of Jian Wushuang, stretched out his slim hand, and gently smoothed the word Chuan wrinkled between Jian Wushuang's eyebrows. What's wrong? Is there something bothering you? You can talk to your body, maybe you will have an idea. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and shook his head and smiled. Shuanga, I'm fine, don't worry about me. After finishing talking, Jian Wushuang extended his finger and gently scratched on the frosty nose bridge, stood up, and shot into the manor. He had a hunch, maybe it won't be long before the universe will be chaotic again. Before that, the only thing he could do was to improve his strength. As long as the strength is achieved whatever the virtual universe is, it is better to eat the organization, or a chess game played by Master Zuanshuan, when the soldiers come to cover the water and cover the soil. Only strength is the foundation of standing in this world. Wu Jian stepped into the practice room and opened a long retreat. For him, it is not difficult to break through the medium supreme, just need to push the boat down the water and continue to condense the power. After he broke through the middle extreme, his strength will reach a qualitative leap. In an instant, 3,000 years have passed. In these 3,000 years, Jian Wushuang has continually condensed his strength and cultivated steadily, finally pushing the elementary supreme realm to the top. For ultra-perfect chaotic creatures such as Jian Wushuang, breaking through the barriers of the great realm will be 10 million times more difficult than ordinary people. But breaking through such small realms is much easier. Jian Wushuang is about to take that step, ready to impact the medium supreme. A decree of the gods of the universe suddenly came to the Temple of Life. The sword is unparalleled, the of the universe has orders, come to the Supreme Temple. The sound of Zun Zuibo's supreme sound rang in Jian Wushuang's mind. Okay. Wu Jianshou slowly opened his eyes, and there was a flash of fascinating light in his eyes. Chapter 44-41. Why did the order of Lord Elder God reach the Temple of Life at this time? Wu Jian's brows frowned, but from the tone of the Bloodwave Supreme, he could hear the emergency. As a result, Jian Wushuang did not delay, and flickered into the manor. He came to the Supreme Temple, where there was a solemnity. The Supreme Bloodwave Supreme and the Great Axe Supreme stood respectfully and acted like a bow. In the first hall of the hall, a young boy with red lips and white teeth was standing with a roll of edict. This person is one of the disciples under the seat of the Colossus, Lan Su. Jian Wushuang, I've seen Lord Lan Su. Qi Jian Wushuang glanced at Shuebo Supreme and others, then bowed slightly. Xingli said, Warriors Supreme, no need to be polite. Wu Lansu smiled kindly at Jian Wushuang. He was quite polite to Jian Wushuang, who was about to become a brother-in-law with him at the cosmic race. Wu Jian Wushuang nodded, and then asked, Master Lan Su, you have spared no effort this time to come to the Temple of Life. What's the matter? Tong Lan Su replied, This time when we come to the Temple of Life, we really need to discuss things. Speaking of this, Lan Su paused, with a look of solitude on his face, looked around the hall, and solemnly said, there is a riot in the extraterritorial battlefield. As soon as he said this, the audience was shocked. What? The extraterrestrial battlefield is rioting? Isn't the extraterrestrial battlefield suppressed by the Lord God of God himself? How could a riot occur? The virtual universe has been peaceful with us for tens of thousands of chaos periods. How could this happen suddenly? What's the situation over there? Are people from the virtual universe coming soon? Didn't it happen, and we will start the war again? Everyone was disappointed, even the Supreme of Bloodwave, and so on. Their faces changed slightly. Looking at this scene, Lan Su's face eased a little, and he shook his head and said, You don't need to be so nervous. The situation is not serious enough. There is my master sitting in the outfield battlefield, and there is no wave in a short time. Hearing this, everyone just breathed a long sigh of relief. Wu Jianshuang frowned and asked, Master Lan Su, why did you come to the Temple of Life this time? Lan Su glanced at Jian Wushuang, and smiled back, This is the case. This time, the extraterrestrial battlefield riots, a large number of virtual cosmic virtuosos have come out in a row, and the Lord God cannot do everything himself, but only by virtue of the supremacy of the extraterritorial battlefield is no longer enough to suppress this riot. It is too strenuous. Then, Master God of the Gods asked me to deploy manpower in the universe. Everyone who has the supreme power in the martial arts must send at least one supreme power to the extraterritorial battlefield to suppress the riot. There are 2 places in the Temple of Life for the battle, that is, your palace must send 2 strong men in the supreme realm to the extraterritorial battlefield. As soon as this remark came to an end, everyone in the Temple of Life looked at each other face to face, and there was no sound for a while. Wu Lansu is not in a hurry to ask for an answer now, Shensheng said. This matter is related to the safety of the universe. I also ask you to set aside life and death and help the gods of the universe to end this riot. Well, now I have to go to the Dragon Clan, and I have to inform the major forces, so I will take a step. 10 years later, I will wait for you at the ferry in Shenyang Starfield, and rush to the extraterritorial battlefield together through the cosmic passage. After I finished speaking, Lan Su didn't stay much, so she strode away. I can see that this time, although not so serious, it is urgent. After Lan Su left, everyone in the Supreme Temple frowned and didn't speak. Don't say that Lord Elder God has issued an order in person. Even if Lord Elder God has not issued an order, they will definitely go to the extraterritorial battlefield. As Lan Su said, this matter is related to the security of the entire universe. Once the riots in the extraterrestrial battlefields cannot be suppressed, a large number of virtual cosmic virtuosos flood into the universe, and then they will cover their nests, and will they be finished? The 2 supremes of this faction went to the extraterritorial battlefield, but it became a problem. Now the supreme governance, the Palace of Life is awaiting revival, and it lacks the pillars. If something happens to the people sent to it, the palace of life may be completely shattered like a collapsed dike. After a short while, the Bloodwave Supreme groaned and said, "The battlefield outside the territory is extremely dangerous and murderous. If the ordinary Supreme went forward, I would be afraid of 9 lives, which is too dangerous." He froze. It seems that Zun Shuebwa Supreme has made a decision and said, "So, this time, the 2 people who went to the extraterrestrial battlefield will go to me and Tien Zun Supreme, and the giant axe will be responsible for guarding the Palace of Life." As soon as this remark came to an end, the Tentacle Supreme next to him nodded. Both of them are top-level Supreme practices. Even if they meet the half-step Invincible Supreme, they have the power of a battle, and the 2 have been fighting side by side for many years. Then they can support each other on the battlefield and have a care. Regarding this, the giant axe has no objection. He has not recovered from the injury, and he can recover the injury while sitting in the Palace of Life. I decided that this decision was about to take effect when the Supreme of the Bloodwaves and the Supreme of the Heavens decided to pack up and go to Shenyang Starfield Ferry. Qi Jian Wushuang and Zhu Jiawang stepped forward with a tacit understanding, with the same voice. "My sword is unparalleled. I am the king of 9 robberies, and I went to the extraterrestrial battlefield to fight for the Temple of Life." As soon as this remark came to an end, everyone in the audience was surprised. Zun Shuebwa Supreme laughed absurdly. "You 2 have a tacit understanding." Jian Wushuang and Zhu Jiawang also couldn't help looking at each other, and their eyes flashed with surprise. Wu Jianshou shook his head and converged his thoughts. "Extreme blood, this extraterrestrial battlefield, even if Lord Lan Su is not here today, I am ready to go." "Oh!" Bloodwave Supreme heard his words, narrowed his eyes. As early as when Jian Wushuang asked him about the battlefield of the outer world and the fall of Tai Luo Supreme, he had some conjectures in his mind, just because Jian Wushuang had something to do with this virtual universe person. However, the sword's unique talent is the ultimate hope for the future rise of the Temple of Life. If there is any good in the extraterritorial battlefield, sword unparalleled, that extraterrestrial battlefield is too dangerous. What you have to do now is to grow slowly. Blood Supreme just wanted to refuse, and saw Jian Wu stepping forward in 2 directions. Shunshan said, "Blood Supreme, if it is dangerous, now with my strength, I am afraid that the risk is even lower." Speaking of this, Jian Wushuang's eyes shot strong confidence. Zun Shuebwa Supreme heard the words, first a moment, then immediately dumb. He almost forgot that Jian Wushuang now can invincibly exist. He is a lot stronger than himself. Bloodwave Supreme is not an indecisive person. When I think of it, my eyes flicker and I take a deep breath and say, "Also, the sword is unparalleled. You will go to the Shrine of Life on our behalf and rush to the extraterritorial battlefield to suppress the riot." Chapter 44-42. Sword unparalleled, take command. Suddenly, Jian Wu's eyes twinkled, and he arched his hand. This time he went to the extraterritorial battlefield. He was bound to get it, one to suppress the riots, and the other to himself. Regarding Master Xuanyi, he had long been guessing. With Xuanyi's strength, if Xuanyi is still in this universe, I am afraid that there will be absolutely no news at all. It is very likely that Shen Yi was in the extraterritorial battlefield. Alas, he should inquire about the news of the Emperor. Finally, his strength has now fallen into the bottleneck stage. Even if he stays in the universe blindly, he will not be of much use. Whether it is the Daewu Temple or the Dragon Clan, he has an invincible supreme power. With his current strength, he can't counteract. What threats do these 2 top forces have? Instead of that, it would be better to go to the extraterritorial battlefield and enhance the strength in the Battle of Killings. Besides that, there is one more point. Is that Ice Supreme? Wu Jian Wushuang remembers that the Emperor Taishu said before leaving that he would take the Bingyu Supreme to the extraterritorial battlefield. Qi Jian Wushuang once swears to heaven, this life and this world will cut the Ice Supreme and others, otherwise he will fall to Joyo, vow not to be human. His sword is unparalleled, never just talking. Extreme blood, what about me? The king of Zhu Jie said beside him. He saw that Shuebwa Supreme arranged Jian Wushuang, but did not mention himself, and he frowned. Bloodwave Supreme glanced at King Jojia, and he could not help but grin at the corner of his mouth. King Jojia was also a stubborn character, afraid that he would not be allowed to stop, and could not stop, but nodded helplessly. Okay, you and swords are perfect, just go together. King of 9 robberies, take your life. Suddenly, a slight delight flashed in the eyes of King Jojia, and he arched his hand. Well, now that this matter is finalized, let's step back. Zun Shebwa rubbed his eyebrows, and his face was a little tired. Now Gvu is sleeping, he is in charge of the Palace of Life, and he is really tired. Yes. Everyone retreated. When he walked to the gate of the Supreme Temple, King Jojia glanced at Jen Wushuang and smiled lightly. Jen Wushuang, the strength of this seat is not as good as you now, but we can compare them, who will be in the extraterritorial battlefield. There are more false slayers in the slain virtual universe. Wu Zhenshuang heard the words, and could not help showing an interested look in his eyes, and nodded, okay. Well, Jen Wushuang, Shenyang Starfield is not close here, you and I will go back and prepare each other, and let us go together 1 year later. After a few words of embarrassment, the two broke up separately. After returning to the manor in the 6th mountain range, the situation that Jen Wushuang is about to go for an expedition told Lung Rushuang that suddenly, Lung Rushuang couldn't help it. Fortunately, Cold as a Frost is not a man of arrogance. Despite the reluctance in his heart, he had to instruct Jen Wushuang in his mouth to be more careful. Wu Zhen saw nothing but sighed. Over the years, the two have always been together and separated, with few chances of intimacy. Also, in the last year, I will be with you. Wu Jian Wushuang made a decision in his heart. 1 year later. Outside the Palace of Life. Wu Zhenshuang and King Joya bid farewell to the Bloodwave Supreme and others who came to see him off, and immediately drove the spacecraft towards the Shenyang ferry in Shenyang Starfield. On the deck of the cosmic boat, Yang Jian Wushuang stood side by side with King Ju Jie. One was in a wide black robe, wearing a hood, blocking most of his face, and the other was in white clothes, winking with snow, his eyes blanched, and his white hair hanging down. The two are black and white, but they are the two most arrogant in the universe. Sword unparalleled, there is almost no cultivation of the vein in the extraterrestrial battlefield, and they can release a strange light wave, which is not easy to deal with. The king of Ju Jojia took the hand and said lightly, although he is arrogant, he is not reckless. In the past year, he has also collected a lot of news about the virtual universe. The more I know, the more dignified and angry he is. The monks of the imaginary universe are cruel and addictive by nature, and treat the people in their universe almost to the extreme. I do know how many cosmic strong men are killed to death in every chaotic era. Strange light waves. Wu Zhenshou raised an eyebrow, and a curious expression appeared in his eyes. Yes. King Jotsai nodded his head and replied, the monks of the virtual universe have an associated supernatural power, which is the weird light wave. We call this weird light wave virtual explosion. Because of the existence of this virtual explosion, the vagrants of the imaginary universe are often better than the monks in the same realm of our universe. Wu Zhenshuang nodded and nodded, but he didn't care. In the same realm, no matter how strong the monk in this virtual universe, Jen Wushuang did not think he would be stronger than him. This is his confidence. Besides that, the powerful men of the void universe look strange, with 3 heads and 6 arms, and headless axemen. In short, they look more like evil, but one thing is that they are very good at identifying them. Every person who has a virtual universe has long marks on their shoulders. I do know who is below the Supreme, but above the Supreme, there is a long mark on the shoulder of the Supreme Supreme, and there are 2 long marks on the Medium Supreme, and so on. The vagrants of invincible supreme strength are 5 long marks. The king of 9 emperors continued to speak, understood. Wu Jian Wushuang nodded. Alas. As the two discussed, they flew towards the Shenyang Starfield, and the speed was not slow, as if a meteor crossed the sky. Xingqian circulation, the galactic circle. 10 years passed in a snap. Sword unparalleled, Xuandar Starfield is ahead. Wang Zhoujian looked up and looked forward, and said, I saw a vast star field formed by countless nebulae and many planets and stars, and in front of everyone, I could see. Well, let's go, they should be here. Wu Jian Wushuang nodded. Immediately, the two walked down from the cosmic boat, put away the cosmic boat, and walked towards the ferry in Shenyang Starfield. Shenyang Ferry is also a gathering place of many cosmic channels in the universe, extending in all directions, connecting the universe's major star domains and top forces. The two just arrived at Shenyang Ferry and saw Lan Su and others waiting on that knee. Heh! Supreme Master? Josei Supreme? Life Shrine sent two people this time? Sensing the approach of Jian Wushuang's breath, Lan Su slowly opened her eyes to look, and her eyes flashed slightly surprised. Wu Jian Wushuang and King Ju Jie are now the most precious cards in the Palace of Life. He thought that this time, the Palace of Life would not send two of them. King of Warriors, King of the Ninth Calamity, met Lord Lan Su. Qi Jian Wushuang and Ju Jie Wang arched their hands towards Lan Su, then looked around, looking at the several figures standing next to Lan Su, a sneer gradually drawn from the corners of his mouth. I didn't expect that I could meet many acquaintances here. Chapter 44-43. At this moment, the young man standing next to Lan Su with twin horns in his head, wearing a gold robe and a sullen face, was not Longqing or Hu. Sword unparalleled. At the same time, Wu Longqing also noticed Jian Wushuang, and suddenly Li Guang sword in his eyes, murderous. Next to him, there are two dragons, 4 generations of dragons. However, the strength of these two people is much worse than Longqing. He is the sword unparalleled. It's him. A rudimentary elementary supreme, lets us dragons so prosperous. How many shots have you made? The two dragons glanced at each other, their eyes flashing with suspicion. It's been a long time, but I miss you so much. Qi Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes to Longqing, and sneered at the corner of his mouth. Compared with Bingyu Supreme, his hatred for Longqing is far more. At that time, he was chased by Longqing crazy, and almost fell into his hand. He stomped that foot and foot, constantly trampled his body to destruction. Of course, if it weren't for this person, he would not have met the Patriarch's ancestors, and obtained the Chaos Patriarch. Okay. Sword unparalleled. I thought I wanted to kill you. At least, after 10 million years, I didn't expect you to participate in this expedition outside the territory. Wu Longqing looked at Jian Wushuang, his eyes flashed cold, and a cruel smile appeared on his face. Sword unparalleled, wait until the extraterritorial battlefield, we have fun. After finishing speaking, Longqing turned his eyes and looked at the King of 9 Calamities next to Jian Wushuang again, and said with a cold voice, there is also the King of 9 Calamities. When you were at the end of the universe race, you asked me what was right. Right. Hehe, these account books are always remembered, wait until the extraterritorial battlefield, you see how this book accompany you two to play. Wang Jujiawang looked indifferent, did not raise his eyelids when he heard the words, and calmly replied, is it worthy of you? You. Suddenly, Longqing's heart was furious, her forehead was violently jumping. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but look funny. The King of 9 Calamities seemed indifferent and whispered, but once he uttered his voice, he could hit the pain point directly. Lan Su frowned, and said, you are all the elites of our universe, in the middle of our suppression of the riots. How can the external enemies not be annihilated before they are annihilated? After a pause, Lan Su said in a deep voice, dear everyone, now the enemy, I hope you all put down your old prejudices and kill the outside world. Otherwise, if I find out, you have affected the battle because of personal conflicts. Just blame me for reporting to heaven and telling Master Zeus. As soon as this remark came to an end, although everyone didn't speak again, their faces were still chaotic. Wu Lansu is not a senior supreme practitioner, but if it wasn't for the Lord God standing behind him, he would have been slapped with a slap. When Lan Su saw this, she had to smile bitterly in her heart. She shook her head helplessly and said, okay, wait a minute, and then we have to set off. You are the first group to go to the extraterritorial battlefield. I have to come back and adjust the second group. Everyone nodded and stopped speaking. Then, one after another, people came from all over the universe. Wu Jian Wushuang has encountered many acquaintances, such as the Juxing son of Juxing Holy Land, and the Mo Luo Yang Jiyu of the Mo Luo family. And a Supreme of Daewoo Temple. In the last 2 wars, the Temple of Life suffered heavy losses, and the Daewoo Temple was not much better. Almost the Supreme Realm was dead. It is very rare to be able to send a High Supreme at this moment. The Supreme of the Daewoo Temple was still high-spirited. When he saw Jian Wushuang, he immediately lowered his head like a mouse when he saw a cat, for fear that Jian Wushuang would bother him. Today's sword Wushuang sword is invincible in 2 major steps, and has long been famous, not comparable to the past. After 3 months, Tong Lansu looked at the crowd, nodded, and said, "Well, the first batch of candidates have arrived, and we can start." I saw at the moment Shenyang Ferry, scattered 11 Supreme. The 11 Supremes are extremely powerful. In addition to Jian Wushuang being the elementary Supreme and Zhu Jiawang being regarded as the medium Supreme, the rest are the lowest and are the high Supreme. Next moment, I saw Lan Su flip her right hand, and a small white flag with 4 handles appeared. "Go with," he whispered, and suddenly 4 small white flags shot into the sky, and then formed an enchantment. Ding tilde. In the void, the rays of light suddenly flew, and beams of light were drawn side by side to form a matrix. Rumble tilde. Immediately afterwards, the boundless void was torn, and a vortex was formed violently. In the center of the vortex, a golden beam of light fell, forming an aperture at the ferry. "Let's go." Xu Lansu turned back and said something to Jian Wushuang and others, then stepped forward and shot into the vortex of the sky first. Wu Jian Wushuang and others nodded their heads, all of which were working divine power, turned into a streamer, and shot into the vortex. Alas! Moments later, the vortex is closed and the sky cleared again. The figures of Wu Jianshuang and others have disappeared. When time passed, Baiku passed the gap. In a flash, 100 years passed. In this century, Lan Su led Jian Wushuang and others, riding the cosmic passage all the way, traveling through the stars, and rushing towards the extraterritorial battlefield. They are extremely fast, often just flashing and disappearing into the cosmic channel. When they appear again, they are already out of several star fields. Gradually they completely moved away from the center of the universe and reached extremely remote parts of the universe. On a desolate planet, 11 supreme figures, such as Lan Su, Jian Wushuang, Zhu Jiawang, and Long Qing, jumped out of the void. Here it is. Everyone walked out of the cosmic passage and looked around. I saw that this star was incapable of growing, the divine power was extremely thin, and there were void storms everywhere. In front of this star, there is a wind howling zone, a black wind like a sword, roaring around and shattering the void. In the midst of the faintness, you can still see in this stern wind zone, there is a powerful and fierce starry giant lurking, and his eyes are constantly emitting red light. Lan Su glanced up at the front, and said, "Through this area of the 9 secluded winds, is the place where our universe is stationed in the extraterrestrial battlefield. There is no cosmic passage here, and we must rely on our own strength to cross." The words fell, everyone nodded. The breath of these starry beasts is not the ultimate dominating strength, even if they are the most powerful, they are barely forced to reach the supremacy, and the presence of the highest supremacy, naturally will not be seen by everyone. Among the crowd, Long Qing, who walked at the end, first glanced at the windward area in front of him, and then looked at the back of Jian Wushuang and King Zhu Jie again, and licked his lips. 9 Heavenly Emperors. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.